So, dear God, thank you for the opportunity that you have given us today to listen to these missionaries and to just listen to how they're living in another place in this world. I pray that you give them the opportunity to better understand the language and the cultures and the beliefs of the place that they're in that may be foreign to them. I pray that the offering that is given to them and the offering that we will be giving will benefit them and others around the world. Amen.
Amen. Great, thank you. All right, so the bucket's open, so come on, bring up your offering, and worship team, come on up, and we'll get started. Some songs. Stand together as we sing.
They'll never come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence. I've tasted and seen how the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, I've tasted and seen. I've tasted and seen how the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Oh, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let
you, Holy Spirit, that you're here with us, that you are a God that's always with us. That Jesus, you didn't just come to this earth to be with us and then leave us, but you gave us your Holy Spirit to live with us forever. So I thank you that your presence can be felt now, can be felt throughout the week. And so we just say, come, we welcome you in this place, in this room, in this atmosphere, in this moment, but in our hearts as well. May we take you as we go from this place, Lord. And we go and share the love of Jesus with everybody around us because your Holy Spirit lives inside of us. Thank you for that. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys for worshiping. You may be seated.
You guys are awesome. I'm proud of y'all for showing up tonight, being so flexible. We are going to have a good message tonight. We last left the Israelites at the border of the Promised Land. Remember, they've been in the desert for this big long time. I think we've probably been there 6 or 8 weeks, and that feels like a long time, but they were there for 40 years, to put it in perspective. So while it seems like a long time to us to kind of hang out there, it was way longer for them. And so the book of Deuteronomy, that's kind of where we've gotten to now. The book of Deuteronomy is basically this big, huge, long sermon that Moses delivers kind of with his last effort to the Israelites. And so specifically, he talks about like where they came from, what their history is, then what the law is that God gave them, and how he got them out of the Egyptian situation and has sustained them through the desert. And he's giving them kind of this idea of, okay, here's what your nation's going to look like, here's the governance, here's how to handle any squabbles, here's what worship's going to look like. He kind of repackages all that one more time for them, because remember, they're a new generation. The last generation all died off in the wilderness, so these guys are new. So he shares all of that, and then he's kind of wrapping up in Deuteronomy 27 and 28, and it turns to prophecy. He starts to speak about something that God has shown him that in the natural, people can't see yet. They're not there yet. And so it's really actually very cool. He's telling the nation of Israel, hey, you're going to go into this promised land, and you're going to get to a place where the landscape is going to call you to a decision. It's going to be a physical place of decision for you guys. And he's talking about this event that's going to take place 23 years in the future. Okay, just think about where you're going to be 23 years in the future. I don't even know what life's going to look like 23 days into the future right now, right? Like, things are weird. But Moses is able to say, God showed me something. You can say, hey, it's 23 years in the future, but he's saying, there's a date coming, and you're going to come to this place that I haven't seen, but you're going to see, and God's going to call you to a place of decision. And this is really amazing because he speaks in great detail about this land, about this landscape that he's never seen. Moses has never set foot in Canaan. He's never gone to the promised land, and he never will. So it's really amazing that he speaks about this. He talks about these two mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, and he talks about the valley in between, but he's never laid eyes on that. So as I was reading this text, I've read through Deuteronomy lots of times, and somehow I never caught these two mountains. And Pastor Rob and I had got to go to Israel a year ago, so now when I read the Bible, I try to remember, well, did we see that? Is that, where was that? What was the landscape like? Those things kind of don't change over 3,000 years. And so I don't remember them talking about this at all. And so I was trying to picture it. And of course, I did a Google search and that sort of thing. But so basically, there's these two mountains, Gerizim and Ebal. And Gerizim is a green and lush and beautiful mountain where cool stuff is growing at the top, right? And the same kind of elevation just next door is Ebal. And it's brown and yucky and desolate and dusty and rocky, and then there's a valley in between those two mountains. And so I was like, well, what does that look like? And so Sarah, shout out to her, she helped me paper mache this awesome model, which may not look like much to you from there, but when you get a chance to look at it here in a little bit, it's pretty cool, and it really lays out this decision for you. So these two mountains are illustrated here in front of us. And so Moses tells Joshua, the new leader, hey, when you get there, when you get to this place where there's a mountain named Gerizim and a mountain named Ebal, I want you to stop and regather everybody and have a big discussion about my blessings and my cursings. Now, we don't like to think about God as a God who curses, but he does, because the curse is when we choose to walk away from him, when we choose to turn our backs to him, there's curses involved because we are separating ourselves from his presence. We're not going in the direction of God, and so we're removing ourselves from everything that is good because that's who he is. I hope that makes sense. We'll kind of come back around to that here in a minute. So he tells Moses tells Joshua, hey, I want you to divide your tribes. There's 12 tribes. I want you to divide them into two. Send 6 of them up Mount Ebal and send 6 of them up Mount Gerizim. And so I already explained, this one's Ebal right here. It's dusty, it's desolate, and it's dead. There's nothing growing there. And then the second mountain is Gerizim, and it's green, and it's lush, and it's life-giving. It's the mountain of blessings, where Ebal is the mountain of cursing. And so Moses actually goes to all the trouble of listing out the blessings of following God and the curses of rejecting him very specifically in those 2 chapters, in chapter 27 and 28 of Deuteronomy. So let's listen in on the blessings real quick. You'll be blessed in the country and in the city alike. So that means if you live in Brenham or you live out in the sticks, you're blessed alike if you choose God, right? It means that you will have a fruitful family, that your family will grow and produce and multiply and be strong and healthy. It means that you will have fruitful crops, that when you put seed in the ground, stuff's going to come up and it's going to be good. It's not going to be infected with insects or blighted or disease. It means that they would have prolific livestock, so cattle and goats and sheep and donkeys and whatever else, other things are helpful to families in the Middle East. It was saying that he blessed the basket and the kneading bowl. So the basket, I'm sorry, I have a cat and he's Persian and he sheds everywhere. Could you see that little hair in the air? No, just me, all right. Okay, so he had blessing in the basket and the kneading bowl. So I'm like, what does that mean? But to me that means you have enough in the basket that you can share with others and enough bread that you can share with others. To me that sounds like having plenty of food so that you can have fellowship. You know, when we have enough, it's easy to share and invite others into relationship with us. He also said that they would be powerful in warfare, that when they struck, that the opposing armies would scatter in 7 directions. He said that they would be established as God's people and that they would belong to his kingdom. All that stuff sounds good, right? It sounds like blessings. On the other side, though, we need to flip that coin over and look at the curses. There are curses for the Israelites if they choose to part the ways with God. So actually the curse list is longer than the blessing list. It's actually about 3 times longer, which I'm like, whoa, God, right? But I think it's a lot easier for us to count our sorrows than it is for us to count our joys, and so that might be part of it. So he said, if you choose to walk away from God, that you will be cursed in the cities and in the country. So in Brenham and in the sticks. You'll have a cursed basket and a cursed kneading bowl. You'll have cursed wombs. It'll be hard to have babies. You'll have cursed crops and cursed flocks. That you would be cursed coming and going. That there would be confusion and destruction. That there would be disease and infection and inflammation and fever. All of that sounds terrible, right? That there would be heat and drought. That there would be a hard sky and a harder earth. That the rain would dry before it hit the ground. That they would experience defeat in battle. That they would have boils and tumors and festering sores and relentless itch. Right? That sounds awful. That they would search without finding. That they would experience oppression and fraud. That they would be slighted and betrayed. Like snubbed and also stabbed in the back at the same time. They would plant, but they wouldn't harvest. They would build, but they wouldn't occupy. So back to building a new house, but you don't get to move into it, right? They would butcher, but not barbecue. I think this one might be the worst. I hate it when I drive past Texas Smoke Pit and they're barbecuing and I can't stop and pick up some ribs, right? That's the worst, when you smell it or you go to the work of it and you don't get to enjoy it.
Not for me. I don't eat meat.
Oh, well, then maybe that one doesn't apply to you. But they would have their flocks stolen without having opportunity to intervene, and their children would be taken into slavery. That would be all, taken into slavery. They would be heartbroken and helpless. The local spoils, the things they grew there, would be eaten by another country. There would be constant oppression and harsh treatment. There would be lunacy. Do you know what lunacy is? Cuckoo, cuckoo.
The superstition of if you went out and slept under a full moon.
That's not what lunacy is. It's craziness. Okay? Lunacy, and there would be outstanding bills that you couldn't pay your bills. Exile, meaning kicked out of your land and forced to worship false gods. There would be a lot of planting and not a lot of harvesting. There would be locusts and worms, unripened olives. Those are terrible if you've ever had unripened olive. Their future generations would be taken into captivity. Swarms of insects would occupy their land. They'd have strong foreigners and weak inhabitants. They would always be the borrower and never the lender. That's the curse. That's a lot, right? That's kind of overwhelming. But the thing is, God gives them a choice. If we just take a survey here in this room right now, if you could choose between blessing and curse, I want you to stand if you would choose the curse. Right, crickets. Nobody wants that, right? Of course, it's obvious and it's laid out that clearly what we would want to choose. And Israel had that very choice. They could either choose to walk with God and honor him and be blessed, or they could walk away from him and be cursed. And so our mountains of Gerizim and Ebal, they represent the choice that the Israelites had, a choice to serve God and honor him, or a choice to go their own way. It's the choice between good, Gerizim, get it? Good, Gerizim, and evil, evil. And you can see the difference in the landscape. And this is all what Moses saw. The mountains were visually different, so the Israelites could see the choice they were making. And it occurred to me as I was reading this is the garden all over again. You guys remember all the way back in January when we started talking about the Garden of Eden, and they had a choice to either honor God and do what he said, or doubt God and do their own thing. And so that's exactly what's happening here. So Moses, as he's getting ready to climb up on a mountain and die, he reminds the new wilderness generation of the covenant that God has offered them. He officially appoints Joshua as their leader. He sings one more song, because you always have another song in church, right? And then he speaks a blessing over his people, and then he passes away. And now Joshua is in charge. The people stop right where they're at, and they mourn Joshua for 30 days. And they mourn Moses, that's right. They mourned Moses for 30 days. They're just sad, sad, sad for 30 full days, and then it's like, okay, the time for mourning is over. It's time to get up and move on, and we are taking the promised land. So then for the next 23 years, for the entire book of Joshua, the Israelites experience both victory and losses. And those victories and those losses are completely dependent on their ability to follow God's instruction. Because he's there with them in battle. And he says, do this, and if they do it, they do well. And if they ignore him, or they do their own thing, they do poorly. And so over 23 years, they eventually, for the most part, conquer the land and divide up the spoils. Each tribe receives a piece of the inheritance. If you look up here on the screen, you'll see the nation of Israel. This far off picture is the nation of Israel, and those different colors are all the different tribes. Remember, there's 12 tribes. And so they've been plotted out in the land. They each have kind of their own county, basically, where they get to live, and that's their land. So they're all kind of subdivided then. And so once they're all settled, Joshua's like, hey, we're not quite done. Remember, we need to meet at the mountains together. And so he calls all the tribes back together, and they meet up in Shechem. Can you see Shechem on there? It's right underneath Manasseh, Tirzah, Shamar, Shechem. Do you see that? So if you look, this second map is the same thing, only squeezed in. If you look where Shechem is, it's in the exact heart of the country. It's really, really cool how God builds like this great big visual picture and acting out of his promises right there in the center of the country. And so they go there, and there they find, right in Shechem, there's the valley, and then there's Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, right there, just like Moses had prophesied and predicted they would be there. So Joshua calls them all together for one more public address before he dies at the age of 110. So I like to think of that valley, the valley of Shechem, this middle part here, as a valley of decision. It's a place where the Israelites came together and had to decide, okay, we have a brand new country. How are we going to lead it? How are we going to act? What are we going to do about God? What are we going to do about each other? What are we going to do about our neighbors? And so Joshua has this epic moment of decision, and you probably are going to recognize part of this verse. He basically lays it all out to them, the blessings and the cursings again. He's like, God's going to bless us if we follow him, and he's going to curse us if we don't follow him. And so then at the end of it, in Joshua 24:14-15, he says, now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. So Joshua, basically his dying words to his country were, hey, God's given us a choice, and I know what I'm going to do. Me and my house, we're going to serve God, but only you can decide what you're going to do, if you're going to serve God or you're going to go your own way. So that's what happened in the book of Joshua. That's what happened in the Old Testament. But this week, as I was reading Mark 3 in the New Testament, I was thinking, wow, this is actually super reminiscent of what we've been reading in the Old Testament. See, in Mark 3, Jesus is just beginning his preaching and his healing tour, and I noticed right away that there are two types of people in his audience. And it's not just there in Mark 3, it's basically every time Jesus ever opens his mouth, there are two kinds of people around him. There are accusers, and there are acceptors. So what do I mean by that? Most notably, the Pharisees are accusers. They're like, who is this guy? Whose authority does he speak with? He is possessed. He's an impure spirit. He's here to divide the church. They say terrible things about Jesus, right?
They think he's a religious terrorist.
Right. Of course, none of them are true, but they plot against him. Actually, Mark makes it really clear that from the very beginning, they're plotting against him, getting ready to kill him. But the thing that surprised me in Mark 3 this week is that it's not only the Pharisees that are plotting against him and that are accusing him. His mom and his brothers show up, and they make accusations against him. They're like, he's out of his mind. Wow. It's one thing when complete strangers have negative things or accusatory things to say about you, but it's a whole other when it's your own family or your own friends. Thankfully for Mary and the brothers, at some point they change their minds and they decide that Jesus really is Lord, and they accept him as Savior, and they're in the upper room when Pentecost happens, and they're part of his team going forward and building the kingdom. But see, accusations against God are really easy to make. In fact, we hear them all the time, right? What kind of accusations do we hear? Things like, God's fake, he's not real, he doesn't exist. Or he's impartial, he doesn't care, he's not picking a team, right? He's uninvolved. He's not messing around with anything happening down here, clearly, right? Or he's unjust, or he's unaware, or he's unreasonable.
Or religion is just a way to control people.
We've heard that too. You might have even felt some of these accusations rise up in your own heart. You're like, where are you at in my story, if you're real? I don't see you, or I'm not sure I know you. And it's okay to consider that, but at some point, we gotta make a decision about who he is. We gotta choose which mountain we're gonna stand on. If we're standing with God, or we're standing opposed to God. People push God away all the time. They make accusations against him all the time, but very rarely do they say, you know, it's not God, God's not the problem. The problem is me. I struggle with obedience. It's hard to follow his word. It's a lot easier for us to make an accusation against his character than it is for us to make an adjustment to our character. It's easier to accuse than it is to admit our own failings. Remember, I said there's two reactions to Jesus. to his ministry. The first is accusation, but the second is acceptance. The acceptors are the people in the crowd that are coming close to Jesus, that they're anxious to hear his message, that they want to know his teaching, and they want to receive his healing. They are acceptors. They're like, whatever you got, Jesus, I want more of it. I want to hear, I want to know, and I want to walk with you the rest of my life.
I'll take your whole stuff.
The acceptors are disciples. They are willing to lay down their life and follow him. I noticed that this choice between accusation and acceptance, it's repeated throughout the Gospels. We even see it on the cross. The two thieves, one of them is making an accusation, right? You're not the son. If you're the son of God, you can bring us all down, make it right. And the other one's like, oh, you are Christ. And Jesus is like, I'll see you in heaven, bro, right? We're going to make this happen in a little bit. So there's two reactions there. One accuses and the other accepts. This happens over and over and over in the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's the very same choice that this brand new nation of Israel faced in the valley of Shechem. Will they make accusations against God, or will they accept him as Lord over their new country? Will they go God's way, or will they go their own way? This story that I'm sharing tonight is 3,000 years old. That's crazy, right? But it's still relevant. It's still a choice that you and I and every person who's ever walked the face of this planet wrestles with and has to make a decision about. People have been making this choice since the beginning of time, and tonight, each of us have an opportunity to make the same decision. See, with the way things are happening in our world right now, I believe that we're standing in the valley of Shechem. That there's good on one side and evil on the other, and that we have to choose what we're going to do. We're standing in that place of decision. There's stuff going on that could take your life in a moment. I really prayed about this afternoon and really all week. I don't want to be manipulative at all. I just want to present the facts of what's going on in our world and give you opportunity to make decisions. If I don't do that, I'm failing you as a youth pastor. The thing is that coronavirus is out there. We know it. It's happening. And we can pretend that it's not, but I think at this point we all know someone who's had it. And we've seen on the news that they're moving refrigerated trucks into hospital parking lots because the morgues are full. That's real. Something could happen to any of us at any point. We could be at a place suddenly where it's time to meet our Maker, and we're going to have to give an account for how we lived and how we believed. Coronavirus aside, though, the violence in our country has had a huge uptick as well. That's super concerning. Things could happen on the way home from here today. Somebody could do something terrible to you or to your family. That's very concerning and very real. Beyond that, people that are far smarter and more educated than me are saying that the world is poised for Christ's return, meaning that the trumpet could sound and our window for decision could just shut. Because once he comes back, we have to make a decision. So apart from that, from all of that, we may not succumb to coronavirus. We may not have anything violent happen in our home or to our family. We may not, Jesus may not come for another 100, 200, 2,000 years. I don't know. But the reality is that life is really fragile. And I don't know if you've experienced that yet in your own life, but I've experienced that over and over again. People I know and love that are living and breathing are suddenly not. And their window of decision has closed. None of us is guaranteed tomorrow. Life is a mist. It's a vapor that passes quickly. Car accidents happen. Infections happen. Heart attacks happen. Fires happen. Our bodies are fragile and fleeting. Life as we know it can change in a moment. I keep telling my kids, Sarah, and then we have a son named Eli that lives in San Antonio. This is not the time to be on the fence about Jesus. This is not a time to put off this decision. This isn't a time to go, maybe I'll start living for God when I'm 40. This is not the time for that. The way things are right now, you need to be sure about where you stand with God. If you're for him or you're against him. Because if you haven't made a decision, That's a decision in itself if your window closes. Do you understand what I mean by that? You gotta be ready to make a decision. It's time to choose a mountain and to take a stand. Have any of you seen the movie Hamilton yet? A couple of us. Okay, in the movie Hamilton, they say, if you stand for nothing, Burr, what do you fall for? If you guys can't take a stand for Jesus, if you can't stand for God and say, I'm living for you, I want to run in the direction of you, you'll fall for anything. You'll get tied up in everything else, everything lesser. Tonight is an opportunity to take a stand. I don't think as long as I've been here that I've given this clear of an altar call. Jesus died for you to cover up whatever you've done wrong. And you know what it is, whether you want to admit it or don't want to admit it. You know we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We all need Jesus' grace. And Jesus' grace makes it possible for us to climb up the mountain of Gerizim and take a stand on the side where we receive the blessings of God, because the blessings are his presence. Everything we describe in the blessings, that's heaven, because it's God's presence. And everything we describe in the curses is hell, because that's the absence of God's presence. It's not that he's punishing us, it's that he's letting us choose to walk away from him. He's letting us choose to walk out of relationship with him. I believe that tonight is a moment carved out in time for each of you to make a decision. Maybe you've made a decision before, and tonight's just the night that you're going to reaffirm, yep, I'm still living for Jesus. Or I've slipped a little bit, and I'm gonna renew that commitment. I want to be sure that I'm living for Jesus. This whole week, there's just been such a heaviness on my heart, moving towards this moment. Like Moses and Joshua, I felt this great weight of responsibility in presenting these two options for you. You can choose God, and you can experience his blessings. Jesus is that biggest one. His sacrifice covers our sin. Or you can choose your own way and choose to be cursed because of the absence of God's presence in your life. So our altar tonight is kind of unique. It's a decision night. It's a decision time. I want you to look again at our visual aid. It's really clear. It's amazing to me. Like, this is just a silly, cheesy, kind of awesome model. But if you went to Israel, like, you could go stand here, and see this carved into the landscape of God's country. You can see Gerizim, good and green and blessed. And you can see evil and dusty and desolate. And you can see that valley of Shechem, that valley of decision between the two of them. So tonight when you leave, you're going to notice that there's pebbles in that valley. We've placed rocks in there in the middle, and those rocks represent you guys. For your altar call, you have an opportunity to decide where you want to move your rock. You can't leave it in the middle. You need to move it somewhere tonight. You get to choose if you want to be in Ebal or Gerizim. Will you accuse or will you accept? Will you stand for yourself or will you stand for God? Will you receive the blessings of belonging to God or the curses of being apart from him? So when I'm done here, we're going to roll this out to the hallway, and as you go on your way, one at a time, we still want to be distanced, I want you just to pick up a rock and put it in the place of your decision. You don't have to do that with anyone. No one's going to watch you. You don't mark the rock or anything. It's a decision between you and God. But I want you to not leave this place without making that decision, okay? And then, when you go home, find someone to tell. If it's a friend, or it's your family member, or you've got a favorite aunt or uncle, find someone to tell. You can text me. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to talk to me about your decision or the reasons for your decision, I'd love to engage in that with you. But tell someone so that you're accountable to the choice that you made. Let me go ahead and close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for your goodness towards us. We know so much of the story now because we've been back in the garden with Adam and Eve, and we've seen Eve's decision against you, and Adam's following, and every generation since then. But even as humanity has chosen sin, over and over you've chosen us. You have never placed yourself out of our reach. You've always made a way for us to get close to you. We saw that in Egypt even, that these folks could worship and connect with you, and you carried them out of slavery and carried them through the wilderness and carried them all the way to this place of decision. We see also in the Gospels where you came in the flesh to know us, to walk with us, to understand what it means to be human and to live a perfect, sinless life and die on our behalf. You offered yourself as payment for our sins, for our mistakes, for our choices against you. What a loving and good God you are. So loving and good that you don't force us. You could, you're God. You could snap your fingers and say in your own mind you got no choice in the matter, but instead you gave us free will. You gave us this choice, the garden choice and the evil and Gerizim choice and the Jesus choice tonight. And so I pray for courage as our students decide where they want to stand. I pray that right now that eternity would be more real to them than it's ever been. That they would realize that they can spend forever with you or apart from you. And that every good thing that we know here is tied to who you are. And that all that disappears when we choose eternity apart from you. Please give our students courage to move the rock to a place that will change the trajectory of their eternity. We love you. We trust you. Help us choose you. Stay in your chairs for a moment while I move this out, and then we can dismiss. Just try to go one at a time. Take your time so there's space and time to move the rock. All right? Thanks for being here tonight, you guys.